So welcome everyone to the Gun Census Zoom that's featuring Chester Community Coalition and the Chester Peace Initiative. My name is Star Cummin Bright, and I am the co-chair with Andrea Morgenstein. Andrea, want to wave? Yes, thank you, Jim. And Jim is our amazing tech guy. And the rest, there's a couple of other board members here, Bill Hom, Bob Sweeney, Liz Loper, and Zek. And I think that's it right now that I can see, at least. So Gun Census is organized to try and reduce gun injuries and deaths. And we do this in a variety of ways, from having these educational Zooms to working legislatively. I think in this coming year, we're going to be really focused on getting a governor that will be helpful for our cause. And we also show up at events and food banks and hand out we talk to people about safe storage and distribute gun locks. And that's been, we've actually done a pretty good job at that. One of our board members, who I don't see here right now, is in charge of that, and she's just been astounding. So I just wanted to say we buy those gun locks and then essentially give them out free of charge. So I'm just going to make a pitch, excuse me, really quickly. For anyone who wants to donate, you could go to guncensus.org. There was a previous glitch which has now been fixed, and the donation buttons are working. So, and we are recording this, which I think everybody has seen up in the upper left. So let me just introduce Alexia and Ronald. I was on a Zoom sort of conference put on by the Office of Victim Advocate, which was all about solutions for gun violence. It was back in the fall, and I heard these two people speaking, and I was just blown away by what they were doing at Chester. And this was on top of the fact that I knew that the gun violence in Chester had decreased in comparison to Philadelphia, where it was just skyrocketing. And so clearly something was being done right. And I got a very brief snippet of it from these two people, Alexia Clarke and the pastor Ronald Williams. And then I proceeded to make contact with them, and I crawled all over their website, and it's a great website. So if you want to find out more after this presentation, their website is really great. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Alexia to start and to talk about what she's. Oh,
Star, can I just one administrative thing first before Alexia starts, and that is that if you want to ask a question, I think Alexia is going to talk for a few minutes, and then Pastor Williams will talk for a few minutes, and when we get to about 7:40 or 7:45, we'll have time for questions. If you have a question, please, in the chat function, you can only send it to me. So I'm the host, so send the question to me. I'll curate your questions, and then I'll ask Alexia and Pastor Williams, the questions at the end. So if you think of something along the way that you'd like to ask, please feel free to send me a chat.
Thank you, Jim. So, excuse me, Alexia, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to take a second and share my screen. So my name is Alexia Clarke, and I am the Executive Director at Chester Community Coalition. We are located in Chester, and we provide trauma-informed support services to survivors of homicide and violent assault in the city of Chester and for the greater Delaware County area. Our mission is to heal the psychological and emotional impact of homicides and reduce trauma-related reactive violence in the city of Chester. And we came to that mission because, as you'll see here in this chart, the city of Chester has had a disproportionately higher rate of gun violence than the rest of Delaware County for a very significant amount of time. And in fact, in 2020, based on uniform crime reporting, the murder rate for Chester was 21 times the rate for the rest of Delaware County. And Chester, bear in mind, is a city of roughly 34,000 people. It's a very small city, a mile square, basically. And it's a small city to have such a dense impact of gun violence. So as Star mentioned, we are seeing improvements in that rate. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with the navigation here.
Do you want to just try to share the screen again and see what happens?
I'm gonna try to share it again.
Okay.
On this screen that I was hoping to get to. So in 2021, we had a better year. You can see that it's better in a few different ways. It's better in the rate of murder that was happening, much lower than it was before. This chart starts with calendar years, then it switches to fiscal years to give us a little bit of a closer look in terms of time frame at the numbers. But we've had a 42% decline in homicides in 2021. And the other thing that I think is really important to note is the solve rate has really increased. That's something that's really important, I think, and has helped to impact the decline that we're seeing. But part of this decline is not just the solve rate. We have a lot of work that's happening in the city of Chester to try to address group gun violence and to stop homicide. We have the group violence intervention out of the district attorney's office, which is more of a law enforcement approach. We have a peer-based approach, like the Chester Peace Initiative, which Dr. Williams will talk about in his section. And then we have a therapeutic approach, which is the approach that we take to trying to address this, because this rate, the rate in 2017 of 85 per 100,000, at that time, the rate of mortality in Afghanistan and Iraq was slightly lower at roughly 83 per 100,000. So a very small city experiencing this sort of trauma that a combat veteran would be experiencing is something that really begs to be addressed. And if we see a rate of disease that high in any other instance, we would call it a public health emergency and we would address it. And so we felt it was very important that we do what we can to address the work. So our approach is based on recognizing that even though we're seeing a decline in the numbers, every murdered person leaves such a significant legacy of grief. We have lives that are changed forever, including the lives of the people who are shooting and the lives of the people who are losing people to gun violence. And so we want to help to address that legacy of grief. The organization was started by volunteers who used to work with Heeding God's Call to End Gun Violence. I don't know if folks are familiar with that organization, but they would do T-shirt memorials around Delaware County to demonstrate the impact of the gun violence. And there would be such an outpouring of grief by people when they would come and point out their family members, and they'd want their family members to be on a T-shirt. And there wasn't really ready access to support for that grief. So our approach is to try to address the trauma that's left behind, because one thing we know about trauma is that trauma creates more violence. Violence is contagious. And so we wanted to provide trauma-informed services directly to families affected by violence and help build community capacity to respond to and prevent trauma. We did a lot of research before we started our work to ensure that what we're doing is evidence-based. We also went to the community and did listening groups to try to understand what people thought would be actually a useful service to them. So we talked with young men, we talked with parents, mothers and fathers who had lost children to gun violence, and we talked to community members who had either directly or indirectly been affected by community violence. And some of what they shared was that they were interested in licensed, trained professionals with experience in handling trauma. They wanted to be sure that they weren't getting student interns who may not be comfortable or, you know, be more disturbed by what they're sharing than they, you know, they would have to feel sorry for them or feel like they couldn't completely reveal what they're going through in the process, as has been the experience in the past. They were very interested in having a safe space to go to. And for them, a safe space was not just, about shooting, but about, does it feel warm? Does it feel welcoming? Does it feel like I'm in a cold and clinical sort of environment? And then the biggest thing that they said to us was, if you disappear like so many other organizations have in the past, what impact will your work have made for us? We want something that will outlast you if your organization failed. And so we have taken that really seriously to heart. We try to hire as much as we can from the city of Chester so that we're building a community capacity through skills. We also provide mental health first aid training free of cost in the city, so that, like CPR training, people are able to offer mental health support during an emerging mental health crisis or a substance use crisis, so that people have these sorts of skills to manage trauma themselves. I'm not sure why I'm having this technical trouble, but here we go. I'm gonna have to go back. One thing that we know about trauma is that when somebody has been shot or they have witnessed a shooting, they're more likely to perpetrate violence. And so we also know 45% of the people who have been stabbed or shot end up within 5 years back in a hospital with a violent injury.
Alexia, what I might suggest is instead of doing the full screen, yeah, do that. Go back to that view. And I think,
yeah, I'm not sure what is really happening here, but 45% of people who have, thank you for that.
Sure.
45% of people who've had a stabbing or gunshot wound will have another violent injury within 5 years, and 20% of those people will be dead within that time. And so we know that it's really important to try to address this as soon as possible to try to prevent some of that hypervigilance, that reactivity, that PTSD and fear that lends itself to violence. So the services that we offer are individual and group therapy, hospital-based violence intervention, case management, outreach, mental health first aid, and trauma-informed yoga. And that's something that we started doing recently because we know trauma lives in the body. So we're trying to take a comprehensive approach to addressing the traumatic experience. To tell you a little bit about the underpinnings of our HVIP model, we partner with the hospital, Crozier Chester Medical Center. It's a level 2 trauma center. We also partner with Chester Peace Initiative, which is the peer model Dr. Williams will talk about, public health model. And we try to address these 4 pillars: safety, which is through preventing retaliation, re-injury, making sure that people, when they're leaving the hospital, are not at risk of shooting or being shot again. We want to look at regulation and relations, so connecting them through case management with resources and support to try to stabilize the situation, and then providing consistent connection over a period of a year with that case management, and hopefully moving them into therapy services. They'll meet a therapist from the first day, so they'll have an understanding or hopefully develop a relationship with her, and then eventually to reorganization, where they have a sense of control and purpose and a sense of hope for the future moving forward. As I mentioned with our program, we really try to focus on the community perspective. So I wanted to share some quotes from focus groups that we did this past year, going back to the community after a few years of operation, to understand what we're doing well, things that we could do better, or things in general that people are thinking or feeling about therapy and violence. And part of what I think is really heartening was when we started in 2017, a lot of the conversation around therapy was resistant. This idea that we don't need that, or if those people might need it, if they're really struggling. And what we found in 2021 was that the conversation had moved a lot more to everybody needs therapy, and mental health is so important, and everybody can benefit from it, whether or not they've experienced trauma. And so that's something that we like to think we've had something to do with through our training, through our work, through our presence in the community. But I think it's something that's reflective of a shift in the larger culture as well, in thinking about mental health as a part of health and not as something that happens to other people. Mental illness as something that happens to other people. Well, one thing I think we really take to heart is that we have to be consistent. We have to build trust. So the person said they can't just come 1 week and then disappear for 2 or 3 weeks and then come back. And that's not just in Chester, that's just anywhere. And then that's when they will slowly but surely open up and talk to you. That's definitely what we found to be the case, that consistent communication over time, that engagement and really being in relationship. We've had people who have taken a year, 2 years before they actually come to our services and sit down with a therapist. But by being that space that they know is there, the people who are going to always treat them in a non-judgmental manner, they can come back and get to the point where they feel safe enough to trust that we will care for them, just as we have without having that actual therapeutic relationship. The other thing that I think has been really important for us is being in community with people and not coming in with any sort of sense that we are, saving or fixing or solving a problem. We really are working with community, trying to be community-led in moving resources to the benefit of people who have experienced trauma. And so when somebody said, it's like a trigger to me where someone comes to me and says, oh, let me help you fix. When you say help, you automatically create an environment where you're looked at as at a higher level than the person that you're helping. You have to be clear that we don't approach situations like that. Find another word, like, how can I support you? And as we have these conversations, I think we learn so much from our community, but I think it also affirms things that we're doing, that this is the right way, that we need to respect dignity, be in partnership, and understand the context and barriers to care, really try to be as non-judgmental as possible. So I just wanted to share our team. We provide training for all our team members in being certified trauma professionals. We also are in the process of certifying all our therapists in cognitive processing therapy, which is a therapeutic model that is focused on PTSD treatment. Ed Mack is our case manager in the hospital. Cara Morales is our therapist in the hospital. Dr. Dawkins is our clinical director and a licensed clinical psychologist. And then we have our art therapist, Alex Johnson, who serves our children 4 to 7-year-olds. We have had children in that age range who have been shot themselves, who have lost family members to gun violence, or who have witnessed people being shot. And so we really try to provide treatment across the lifespan. This is a timeline just pointing out our growth and how we've developed. In 2017 is when we first received funding to develop our program. In 2018, we started providing services through contractors. In 2019, we shifted so that we could actually have more control over the model that we were using to treat our clients. In 2020, when the pandemic hit, we really had to change. And so we started doing the hospital partnership, and we started, which was an invitation from the hospital to provide that psychosocial, social emotional support to people because they just didn't have that piece available. And we provided individual therapy, which could do remotely. And we have found, and then in 2020, and at this point now, we're trying to really transition and figure out what our long-term looks like. So here's just a little bit of our outcomes.
Alexia, I'm gonna give you a 2-minute warning just so that we make sure we save some time for the pastor. So
that's fine. This is my last slide.
Okay, thank you.
So the blue is this our for 2019. And it shows that we used to do a lot more group support. When you look at red, that's 2020, and we have really expanded. That's where we introduced our individual therapy and our HVIP, but our case management and partner groups really expanded. And currently those individual and partner services tend to be the strongest parts of our programming. Our clients tend to screen positive for PTSD, depression, and complicated grief. They're primarily women and African American. And on the first day, we served 1 person, and last year we served 163 people. So we're really proud of the growth that we've had and the work that we're doing. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Williams.
Right. Pastor, I'm going to put you on speaker.
Can everyone hear me okay? Just wait. Okay, awesome. Well, listen, first of all, I want to thank God for this opportunity to be able to stand or sit before you in this webinar. And I really am thankful and honored for this privilege. I want to thank Sister Star for inviting me, and the work that you all are doing as Gun Senses. I really am thankful for your advocacy and the part that you're playing, and as we address gun violence. And then my awesome sister, Alexia, I'm so glad that she was able to go before me. Now, I must warn you all, if you were a little more sedate because of her angelic voice, I'm a little more high energy. And so I may be, and I got a little less time, so I'm gonna be a little bit more faster than her and a little more louder maybe, because I enjoy the opportunity that we have today. I want to share with you very quickly the map where we're going to go. I'm going to talk about violence and its impact generally across the country. We'll look at CPI and our impact. And then I'm going to talk about a vision, a blueprint for violence prevention 2.0. And then I'll round out with a little lighter part of this work. Now, I know the audience I'm talking to, and so let's deal with numbers. This is where it gets a little techie, a little heady. The United States as a whole, the rate of gun violence among our country is 25 times higher than other developed nations. There's something about gun violence in our country that is really, it requires an address, an appropriate address. 43,383 people died in 2020. 43,383 people died. Of that number, and here's where this is intentional. I want you to really be shocked by this. Children are disproportionately being impacted by this issue. We had 694 children from ages 0 to 11 injured, over 3,000 adolescents killed or injured. 2020, 292, 0 to 11 killed, 1,062 adolescents killed. You would have thought that in a pandemic, things would get better. It got worse. 2021, the numbers went up to 44,874 people died in this country last year in the midst of a pandemic. We had 749 children, 0 to 11, injured in a pandemic. 3,300 teenagers injured in a pandemic. 311 children killed, 1,238 adolescents killed in a pandemic in this country last year. So gun violence really is impacting us in a grave manner. When you look at these bar charts, I just showed this to show you that a trend that there's continuing to go. Things are getting worse and worse and worse, not better and better and better. Yes, Alexia.
Pastor, we're not seeing your charts. I don't know if you. I don't
You're
know
not
if you,
seeing the charts.
we're seeing you perfectly.
Okay. Let me switch. Can you see the charts now?
There you go. There they are. Thank you.
Okay, so can you see all the charts now?
Yeah, we can see it. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. All righty. So when we look at gun violence and you look at how it has affected our children, again, I just wanted to show you the number of injuries and the number of murders or homicides that are occurring in regards to teens and children in this country and the trend for the last 5 years. When you come to Philadelphia, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the numbers aren't any different. There's a trend of upward trend in both injuries and homicides when it comes to gun violence in our country. Chester is not any different, although we have done some things to try and curb. We are making a lot of progress, and we are happy with some of the things that have been put in place to kind of help us deal with this issue in a more appropriate way. Cure Violence is it was ranked the number 9th NGO. It is a public health approach to dealing with gun violence. And really, here's the nuts and bolts of what we do as an organization, Chester Peace Initiative. We are funded, first of all, by the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. We're on our second year, the last year of a 2-year grant that was almost $250,000. We are the fiduciary, and the partnership that we work exclusively with is Temple University School of Medicine, the research division in particular. And the model was implemented and brought to the city by the Ministerial Association of Chester and vicinity. We've been working on this since 2019. And so we've been boots on the ground in the city addressing this issue since 2019 with bringing a public health approach to dealing with gun violence. When we talk about Chester Peace Initiative in particular, because this was a pilot program, we took in 2019, 2018, 2017, we took what was probably one of the hot spots, as you call it, in the city. And we marked out this territory as a place where we would pilot this public health model of dealing with violence. The Chester Peace Initiative operates with 2 outreach workers, as well as myself, the program manager. And we've been doing this work, like I say, we released and got live in 2020 is when we actually went live with our site. The first year live, we had 6 homicides and 12 injuries in our target area. What I do is I plot all of the homicides that happen, all of the homicides, gun incidents, injuries in the city that happens, whether in our target area or not, because we want to know how to address the issues. In our target area, we had 18 people affected by gun violence in 2020 when we went live. Last year in 2021, we had 7 homicides, 2 injuries, and 9 people affected in our target area, which means if you wanted to be, and we don't celebrate this because still there were people who died, people who got injured. We had a 50% reduction in people who are affected by gun violence. For us, you know, it's a win, but not necessarily a win. We like to see an entire year with no shootings, no injuries. The city of Chester in 2020 had 53 people affected by gun violence, and that was either a homicide or an injury. And then in 2021, the city saw a precipitous drop, as well as Alexia alluded to, where we had 16 homicides, 17 injuries, or 33 people affected. And this data is unconfirmed data because we don't have access to the actual numbers that the police department has. But this is coming from third-party vendors, as well as our own marking of data in terms of when we hear about shootings and when we respond to shootings. A little bit about our participants. Our participants range in age from 17 to 50. We recruit, literally we recruit individuals who are considered high risk potential candidates to deal with gun violence, be a part of the gun culture, and we recruit them. As you can see, 67% or 80% of our participants are between the ages of 17 and 30 years old. 64% of our participants were formerly incarcerated. We have over 55% of our participants are either on probation or on parole. Our desire is to try and deal with the population who are most prone to gun violence, as well as offer this population who many have written off, don't want to have nothing to do with, want to stay far away from as possible. We are attracted to them because we believe that there's still hope that they can change and do something better, and not be a part of that recidivism statistic that is continually growing on a regular basis. When it comes to employment, we have 42% of our constituents are unemployed. One of the biggest issues that we wrestle with is the folks who are in this zone of gunplay are not normally gainfully employed individuals. There are educational challenges. And so we're trying to figure out how we can partner with them and create what we call risk reduction plans to help them change the fabric of their life, make better choices, and therefore get out of the culture of gun violence. So when you see an unemployment statistic of the country that's at 30%, trust me, our statistics are even worse than that because of the culture, the community of people that we're dealing with. When it comes to the risk factors of the individuals that we believe are more prone to gunplay, we're looking at folks who are either gang involved, key role in the gang, prior criminal history. There's activity that they are doing that really lends itself to shootings, incidences of gun violence, like drug dealing, maybe taking cars, hopping cars, any number of things that activity that could be a high risk activity. They were either the victim of a shooting, someone in their family was a victim of the shooting, or one of their friends or someone close by them was a victim of a shooting. We target the area between ages 16 and 25, and they were recently released from prison. For someone to be considered high risk, they have to have at the minimum 3 or 4 of these characteristics for us to consider them a high risk individual. If they're a high risk individual, we're going to give special attention to them and go and take a certain process of dealing with them. If they're medium risk, we'll do the same thing. If they're low risk, we create a plan that really works with them. But our focus is really on the high risk individuals and the medium risk individuals, which in our program, medium and high risk individuals make up 52%. They make up, what's that, 85% of our clientele is either low or medium risk. When we're doing this work day to day, I want you to have a face to see who's doing this work of engaging with the individuals who are prone to gunplay, because I don't want this to be just an archaic, distant thing. One of our most superior, or our supervisor and senior member on the team, is a guy by the name of Jonathan. Jonathan spent 10 years in federal prison, came out and is like a poster child for redoing life after prison. He came out, got his degree in social work. He is a strong advocate for going back into the community in which he created havoc, and trying to now, if you will, pay penance back to that community by giving back and sacrificing and trying to change the culture and the mindset of young people. He's a grandfather, has about 7 kids. He's been in this work for more than 7 years. During this work, he's a strong re-entry individual as well. Bayat is one of our newer guys. Bayat is a legacy outreach worker. And when I say legacy, his father, Pastor Calvin Williams, who passed away, was a credible messenger doing this kind of work before there was even a such thing as cure violence or whatever. His father would actually go into the various communities and literally have conversations with individuals, and as a credible messenger tried to do things of this nature. When his father passed from cancer last year, Bayat felt a certain calling to fulfill the same shoes that his dad was doing. And Bayat himself did about 7 years in prison, and for drug-related activity. He decided to come out, do some things differently, and he's changed his life. And as well, he now is an interrupter working in the community, trying to make a difference. And then our newest employee, and a unique individual, we call him C's. C's is our newest hire. He's the neophyte in this work. However, he's also the youngest in this work, and we are really delighted to have him be a part of the team. He works primarily as a hospital violence interrupter, and he works the rest of his time with us as an outreach street worker. He brings a unique flavor to the team in that he is the next version of where this work is going for the organizations who are involved. One of our greatest assets this year, 2021, last year, that we were able to capitalize on was Chester Community Coalition, Crozier Hospital, and Chester Peace Initiative came together, and we signed a formal agreement to work together to address the systemic issues of gun violence. And it was a groundbreaking partnership and collaboration, and one that allows us a unique focus to address this issue from a very tactical and strategic method. Anybody that's shot in Chester, 9 times out of 10, they're going to end up at Crozier Hospital. The faster we can get to that individual, the better it is for us on the outside in the streets to figure out how we can stop a retaliation from happening, or the faster we can actually get to someone with the family to kind of see where their mind frame is and kind of help them process what has happened. As Alexia pointed out, trauma from a shooting is unimaginable, and we're not mental health professionals. So Chester Community Coalition gives us that added advantage that when we incur a person, we have someone that we have a good relationship with, that we can immediately connect trauma-induced individuals to, so they can begin to get care as quickly as possible. This collaboration and partnership is really the next iteration of violence intervention, because we have this thing called the golden moment or the golden hour when someone has been victimized by gun violence, whether they were in a shootout and they were causing it, or whether they were an innocent bystander. There's still this golden moment or golden hour where there's a time of reflection. They can figure out what they're going to do. There's a need to do a safety assessment. How am I going to respond to what has happened to me? Is my family safe? Am I going to be safe if I get out of here? What's the next steps? And so we help them process that as early as possible using this HVIP connection with the street outreach as well. And then we're able to provide trauma-informed care, so that there's a different level of empathy brought to the individual who's in the hospital, sitting up, trying to process what has happened to them. And Alexia's team helps us to understand how sensitive approaching an individual in a hospital, how sensitive we need to be by offering trauma-informed care. And what does that mean? Being trauma-informed means understanding that experiences like violence affect the way someone thinks, feels, and behaves in specific ways, including hyperarousal and depression, and tailoring their approach to at least not punishing or re-traumatizing someone for exhibiting trauma symptoms. So today I was in a hospital with a young man that was just a part of a shooting not too long ago. And he, as we were talking, I, kind of asked him, I said, like, listen, can I ask you a personal question? I said, as you're in this hospital, you just shared with me that you are now paralyzed from legs down. How has that impacted you? 22 years old. How are you feeling about that? And he began to say, listen, it's rough. I got good days. I got bad days. I get depressed. I get discouraged. I'm supposed to be at the prime of my life, and there's a good chance I might not walk again. Having that conversation with someone and being able to help them to feel that they are listened to, that someone else is concerned for them is important. And so this HVIP allows us the opportunity to really get in and start doing some other work well before the individual comes back out into the streets. And if we play our cards right, this individual can come back out into the streets and have a different approach than he or she might normally have. Normally, without someone coming in, as soon as someone gets out, it's all about, okay, it's on. Who are the individuals that cause this trouble? We going back to work. And that's usually the mentality, but we try to interrupt that and create a more graceful response. This collaboration allows us to create a unified treatment team, a treatment team that has a plan of follow-up, removing barriers. Alexia's organization, being that they have social work expertise, mental health expertise, they can kind of help us as we deal with the violence piece, the gun violence piece. We can help bridge the gap of making sure that they get the mental health and the counseling services that they need. And then there are other services that are out there that we don't even know about that a client is being given because of what the mental health professionals and social workers bring to the table. And then of course, at the end of the day, all three of us, Chester Peace Initiative, Chester Community Coalition, and Crozier, we're all looking to figure out how to reduce retaliations, violence, and the exposure of the community to violence. At the end of the day, we want to change community norms. We want to bring health equity. And I must say this in all transparency, Chester Crozier Hospital has not had a very good reputation with the African-American minority community of Chester. And because of this partnership, we're trying to help change and reframe the community's perspective of the hospital and the blessing that it brings, the care that it brings, the assets that it brings to trying to reduce gun violence and create a healthy, healing community. And at the end of the day, we want to improve community healing and community-based trauma response. So what do? I talked about how we interrupt transmission, how we reduce high risk dealing with those individuals. The last piece of my puzzle as we get out of here is what's the bottom line? We want to change the community norms. This is what we do. We don't just deal with the ugly part of this thing, if you will, by going out here and mediating conflicts and trying to take people, talk people off of bridges and stuff. We also try to do a lot of goodwill things. When it comes to our clients, one of our clients wanted to become an entrepreneur, start a detail business. So what did we do? We asked him to come up with his plan, and then we seeded money for his plan. We went to him, we said, listen, we will pay for your first, we'll host a detail event. We will pay $500. We'll give you $500 for detail jobs. We'll turn around and offer free car wash details to the community so they can come in. Now you'll wash the cars for free, but we will have paid you for those detail jobs so that you're not losing any money. And then anybody else that comes after the 25 car washes, we will pay $25 for every car that's washed after that, which is half of the detail fee. So any customer that came up for a detail would pay $25. We would pay the other $25. Therefore, this individual would make his full bill on a detail job. That's what we do. Here's someone that was a shooter, potential challenge to the community. Now they're doing something positive. We respond to shooting incidences by having a shooting response, which we call reclaiming sacred ground. When someone has died or been shot at a particular space because something bad, something evil happened in that space, we go back to that space and we reclaim that space a space that is going to promote life. We sometimes will invite the family if they're up to it. Community people are invited to be a part of it. And we try to create positive imaging. Our violence outreach workers meet with individuals wherever they find them in the community. This past summer, we threw what's called Praise on the Avenue. We partnered with Macedonia Seventh-day Adventist Church, Walgreens, Chester Community Coalition, a vendor called Big Bars Water Ice, Message Magazine, Just Pizza. And what we did was we had a vaccination. We gave away free vaccines. We had a table set up for mental health services. Walgreens was doing the vaccinations. The church was singing praises. We had a prayer tent. We were giving away free pizza to any and every candidate that showed up. We also gave away was it $500 or almost $1,000, I think, in gift cards to individuals who came up and were vaccinated, or just for various reasons. They didn't have to be vaccinated. We gave a nice little sum in a way of gift cards to those who got vaccinated for COVID-19. But then we just gave out regular gift cards just for people attending. And it was a very huge success. We held a listening session called Health, Hustle, Honeys, and Homies in one of our housing developments. And this listening session was on two things. Number one, the African-American Black male is not getting ready to get vaccinated in record numbers. And so we wanted to have a candid conversation on why you don't want to be vaccinated. And secondly, we want to have a listening session about how we could do better in terms of addressing systemic gun violence in the city. And so that was that community listening session. And we offered vaccinations to individuals who actually came a part of that. And again, we gave away gift cards, huge success. Alexia and the coalition that we have established is a coalition of various entities within the city of Chester who are in this space. Where young people from the Boys and Girls Club of Chester were invited. And this particular picture that was taken of these young people who are actually showing us a map of where they feel safe in the city. They literally went around and mapped the city of Chester where they felt were safe havens, and they could go and have a time where they could be outside and not worry about gun violence. And so that was important because it helps us to understand from their eyes, what does this city look like and what is needed for them to feel safe to be a part of it. Cure Violence is an international family. I'm originally from St. Louis, and while I was in St. Louis, they have 3 Cure Violence sites. I went by the South Side site, which was one of the better ones, and not better in terms of quality, but this one has had the most success in terms of decreasing gun violence. They were featured. This is the South Side site. They were featured on Dateline NBC, and so I had a chance to go back. And they were wanting to know what's going on in Chester. I want to know what's going on in St. Louis. And we just had, we're like one big family when it comes to doing this work. And so we had the opportunity to chop it up and really get to know each other, even though we've seen each other on trainings and things of that nature. So this space of violence intervention is really like a brotherhood, a family of individuals who have the same goals and aspirations, and that is to stop violence wherever we can. We spent a lot of our time in the pandemic phase trying to apply the principles of public health from COVID, and we have a public health model for dealing with violence. The two are commensurate one with another. And so what you see the country literally going through to deal with COVID-19 is the same exact principles and models that we use to deal with violence. And so therefore, when COVID-19 hit, we didn't have no problems because we're already in the public health. Our methodology is public health. And so it was just a matter of making some adaptations and changes, like putting on face masks. So instead of our guys going out and saying, okay, we can't go to work today. No, you're gonna go to work today, my friend. We're just gonna put a mask on. We're gonna do 6 feet distancing. We're gonna do more calling than face-to-face until we can get a handle on this thing. It was an easy translation for us to go from where we normally operate into a COVID-19 protocol of operation. Trainings happen. Booster trainings usually happen virtually for our team. We spend a lot of time trying to convince and help our guys get their warrants wiped out, Also, if they have some charges that are not of a level that would warrant them to have it on to have a record, we do a lot of trying to do expungement work. Jonathan is really, really passionate about expungement work. And so he spends a lot of his time trying to get our clients to get their necessary credentials in place so that they can get their warrants and or records expunged. Up top is a reclaiming of sacred space, where we go and reclaim sacred space. And then there were some marches that we are part of. Either we start a march or we participate in a march. This is the other side of what we do to try to change the norms of the community around violence. And as I conclude with this final thought, I would never consider myself to be as relevant or as significant as Dr. King. But I do believe our work is just as important. And for Dr. King, this is what helps me to wake up every day and to continue to do what I do. He says, as an individual has not started living until he can rise above the narrow confines of his individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity. And so as a pastor, as a violence interrupter program manager, my whole life is changed because I'm able to do something that I think impacts the community at large. That's my presentation. I'll take any questions if anybody has them.
Yeah, I'm going to unmute Alexia. There we go. And so here we go. We got a couple. I think the first question is both to Pastor Williams and to Alexia, and you guys can fight over how you want to answer. The question is this: in addition to any funding from state or federal government to support your efforts, are there any laws you would like to see enacted in Harrisburg or DC that would help prevent gun violence in our cities, particularly Chester? So the law question from either the state level or the federal level. Any thoughts from either of you two guys?
Well, there are thoughts that we have around the culpability of gun manufacturers to the epidemic of gun violence in the country. And I think we would love to see some movement in that area, in that respect, to because we know when we talk to the manufacturers, whether it's tobacco cessation or tobacco being the major example, we're able to make a change in the societal experience of a disease. So when cancer through tobacco was happening and they really challenged the manufacturers and really held them accountable, we've seen a drastic reduction in smoking in this country. I think that if we're able to do something similar around manufacturers, that we might be able to see a declination, significant declination in gun violence in this country.
Pastor Williams, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I was on your website earlier today, and I agree with some of the tenets that you have background checks for every gun purchase. I hadn't heard about the extreme risk tool, which enables family and law enforcement to petition. I agree with that. I think any legislation around taking these militarized guns out of the hands of non-military people, period. I don't think citizens who even can have a reasonable use of gun needs a military style gun. I don't think they should be in any, even if you're a hobbyist, you don't need to have that kind of gun. So if you're not military, I would like to see legislation around that. I could be a strong proponent of that when it comes to legislation. But I don't, and I shouldn't say but. However, I haven't had a lot of experience in looking at this from a legislative perspective. I'm so hands-on with how do we deal with the individuals who are victims of it. I find myself overwhelmed by the victim side of the story. Right. But I do support those who are on the legislative side.
And I will say for the Sisters of St. Francis who helped to found our organization, they have done a lot of work on trying to move the conversation with gun manufacturers forward. So they are shareholders so that they can be part of shifting the policies of gun manufacturers to help prevent gun violence in the country.
I have a couple of more here. In fairness to our co-chair Andrea, she's asked a bunch, so I may not be able to ask all of them, but I'm going to give it a shot. So Alexia from Andrea, are case management services home-based? And then are you offering groups as well as individual therapy?
So our case manager meets people where they are. We do case management through teletherapy. We do home visiting. We do case management at Shiloh Baptist Church, which is where we rent space for our offices, and also at the hospital. Ed Mack is really just a wonderful person, and he will go where people need him to be, and he will move mountains to get people to what they need. In terms of services, yes, we do group therapy. We just closed out our fall group in the first week of January, and we're going to start our spring group for survivors, so grief support in March, the first week of March. We do individual therapy year round, so intakes are ongoing all the time, and all our services are provided free of cost.
Thank you. I also have a multi-part question for you. All right, do you have your pencil ready, Reverend? Pastor? Okay.
Oh, Pastor.
So,
okay.
Pastor, this is how long do you remain involved with participants, assuming they choose to engage? And then the second part is, do you find yourself with people turning to you to talk them down from doing something impulsive?
We stay engaged with a client as long as the relationship is allowed. We have clients that we have gotten who come into the program. One of our graduates got a CDL license and is now a truck driver. We still hang with this individual because he has influence in the community. There are others behind him who need to see his model, and he has a circle of influence. So we stay connected with our clients as long as they will allow us to stay with them. And yes, mediation is what we do. Last year we had 20 mediations. So what you don't see, you will never see us on the television. Chester Peace Initiative is not going to have a camera in front of them telling the community what we do. That does not work for the clientele that we are dealing with. Individuals who are high risk and are prone to gunplay, the last thing they want to see is somebody on the television saying, hey, look what we're doing to this community. They already have ego issues. And so you won't see us doing that. And so our mediations are the things that we do that regularly, because individuals, and we call it cool. When something happens, somebody could lose their life over a $5 or a $10 dime bag. We call a dime bag of weed. That individual will be ready to go and shoot. We will talk with an individual who has that issue. We'll give the $10, and then we're monitoring that individual and that relationship for as long as needed, because we don't need that to come back. So our ideal of how to mediate conflict is just that. What's it going to take to keep you from having to go and resort to gun violence? So we've helped clients in that situation get right. Somebody owed them $10. We're like, look, if you let us give you the $10 and you be made whole, is that good? All right, cool. And then we monitor that situation.
It's a great answer. I have one last one here, and we're getting close to our time. This person asks, I'm a community organizer in Erie, and we are meeting with the city tomorrow about, quote, policing, end quote. Their answer to increased violence is adding 21 officers with ARP funds. What would you say to this response?
Alexia, you want to answer that?
You can go ahead.
Listen, I know my audience, you all do not look like me, okay? I'm an African-American. We are already feeling too much police in our community. That's one of the challenges with the focus, deterrent, or police model. It requires more police to come into a community that's already at odds with the police and try and strong arm people into doing right. It has never worked. It does not work. we have our public health approach treats our community as though they are people. Literally, there are other models that have spun off of Cure Violence. Cure Violence is the gold standard. It was the start of how you do violence prevention. And so people have taken and pulled from this model bits and pieces, and then have tried to create their spin on Cure Violence. And the focus deterrent models are not the best approach for a Black community that is dealing with gun violence. We've had the greatest success with our model because it brings a certain level of humanity to the situation. Now, I will admit, because let me balance this, there are some people, y'all, that we can't get through. They need a focused deterrent model. And so I'm not saying that we shouldn't have that model at all. Some people will not respond unless they are given that you either gonna go back to jail or we're gonna make your life harder, because they don't want the softer approach of a public health approach to change their mind. They want to have to deal with that strong arm of the law. And so it's not an either or, I think it's a both and. However, my first suggestion would be the public health approach first.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'd just like to chime in that there is evidence that having police presence and the group violence intervention with that focused deterrence does have an impact on reducing crime. With reducing gun violence, it is a successful model in terms of evidence, but as Pastor Williams said, it's not the only approach. I think when they're talking about increasing policing, what kind of policing are they intending to do? When we think about Camden's example, we see that community policing was really very successful and very helpful in reducing violence in the city of Camden, New Jersey. And of course, that takes a lot of coordination and collaboration, communication with community partners and with the district attorneys, with the police officers, and not everywhere is ready for that sort of collaboration. So it'd be interesting, for me, I'd be interested to learn what kind of policing these extra officers would be coming in to do, because there's always going to be funding for more police. Unfortunately, I feel like there should be as intentional funding for public health approaches, for therapeutic approaches. If we have evidence to show that we can make a difference, that support should be equal to the support that the police receive as well.
It should be noted that
sorry, go ahead.
Camden's success started with Cure Violence. So Cure Violence was in Camden, and then they created a model where the police got involved with community policing, and it has been one of our best implementations of the model. And so, yeah, we do look at Camden as a great example of how the community policing and Cure Violence can work together.
So Star, I'm going to turn this back to you. And the last question, maybe you can, as you say, thank you. The one question is, in addition to Gun Census, of course, how can people donate to these programs that Alexia and Pastor Williams represent?
Well, if you'd like to visit our website, it's www.chestercommunitycoalition.org. I'm happy to, well, I can't put it in the chat, but feel free to visit us there. We have a page, makes it really easy to donate to our organization. Thank you, and we appreciate that support.
And for the Chester Peace Initiative, our 501c3 is with the Ministerial Fellowship of Chester and Vicinity. So if you wanted to make a donation to the Ministerial Fellowship of Chester and Vicinity, that's how we could get our funding. You could donate to our organization.
Great, thank you. All right, Star, back to you.
Thank you both so much. You know, you've been so informative, and I really appreciate the planning that went into the efforts that you have going now, and that you've continued to really be in touch with the community about what's working, what's not working, and continuing to you know, bring along these people who have gone for you Pastor Williams, you know, come through, and you've been a success story, and it continues to model for essentially the next generation of people coming out. And this concept of continuity, I think, is really, really important. Alexia, you mentioned it at the beginning, and it is really true. You know, people who come in just to fix something, they, you know, they leave after a certain point. And people who are living and, you know, from the community and working in the community are the people who can really make a huge difference. And I want to applaud both of you for what you do. And thank you so much for doing your presentation for us. I think it's, you know, great opportunity for us to learn.
Thanks
you.
for having us, and thank you for the work that you do as well. It takes us a while.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everyone.
Well,
Good
thank
night.
you. You
Good
take
night.
care.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.